This is Beyond the Verdict. I'm John Horford with Marion Cook. And if you didn't listen to part one of our OJ series, please go back and listen to that first. You're not going to want to miss Myrene's sass and a threat to anybody who believes that OJ may be innocent at the end. So go back, listen to that episode, and then come back to this one. Myrene, let's get right into it.
All right, well, let's clarify for just a second. It wasn't a real threat.
Of course not a real threat, but she just said that she would love the opportunity to have a very cordial, peaceful, respectful discussion with anybody who believes that OJ may be innocent.
I can do that.
That's fair?
That's fair.
Okay. Perfect. So, speaking of, you wanted to start off this episode talking about how the murder of Nicole Brown Simpson didn't just happen out of nowhere. There were events that led up to this that clearly showed that this was a potential possibility and that the incidents between her and OJ were escalating and semi-frequent. I mean, I think one time is too many, for domestic violence incidents, but there were numerous times the police were called, correct?
That's true. There were at least 9 times that Nicole called the police because OJ was being abusive. He was being threatening, whether it was when they lived together at the Rockingham estate or when she moved to her first address, I think, was on Gretna Green. But after that, it was on the Bundy Street where she was ultimately killed. But Nicole was known to say, and she told her family, if anything ever happens to her, she's afraid OJ's going to kill her. And when you look at their tumultuous history, it certainly seems like it led right up to that. There were numerous 911 calls that have been played in and around the trial ever since, pretty much on every anniversary of their death in June. And you can hear, at least in a couple of them, you can hear OJ just yelling and ranting and raving in the background. And she is begging for police to hurry up and get there because she's afraid.
Do you remember specifically, like, and if you don't, that's okay, what he was saying in any of the 911 calls?
It's hard to hear the actual words unless you really go back and analyze. But I mean, he is just yelling and swearing and just ranting and raving is the best way I can describe it.
So it wasn't always physical then?
Well, she was afraid he was going to break down the door. She said at one point he did break the door. He's broken other things. She said that she's afraid he's going to, I think it was one time she said she was afraid he was going to beat her ass again. So there was a lot of violence, but it really was a lot about control. And I think that's where, when he lost that, I think he lost it altogether.
What was it ever proven that OJ was physically abusive to Nicole? Before?
I believe he might have been convicted one time of domestic violence, maybe got probation, something like that. But she, in her safety deposit box, actually had photographs of bruises of her face, bruises of her arms, other injuries that she had. And her sister, Denise, I believe it was, knew about those. And they had friends who actually saw these things happen too. And interestingly enough, remind me when we talk about the trial, because I want to talk about one of their friends who saw these things. But if you look back, so this murder happened in 1994, and OJ and Nicole actually divorced in 1992. They were living separately. They had shared custody of their 2 younger kiddos, Sydney and Justin. But I think it was something where OJ was jealous. He couldn't let go. It was okay for him to have a different girlfriend or multiple girlfriends, but not for Nicole to do anything, not for Nicole to go out or have fun or, act like a single person might. He really did not like that at all.
He didn't like that, and then he would act out in these ways and be violent. Whether it was just being aggressive or actually, physically harming Nicole, as you cited, based on the pictures. Why did she continue to go back? And I know you had mentioned in the last episode that it's actually fairly common for women in situations like this to go
It
through
is.
multiple rounds of this sort of back and forth.
It is very, very common for women, survivors of domestic violence at the time she was a survivor, to go back to their abuser. And sometimes they think it might be easier than dealing with the ranting and raving, the other violence. The abuser may promise after an episode never to do it again. They may promise they're going to change. They may promise to be better, all the things that a person may want when they are looking for love and wanting to keep their family together. And I think that's really where Nicole's head was at, according to her family and the articles that I've read from them. Nicole really wanted her family to be together, and they tried reconciling, she and OJ, multiple times. In fact, they had made attempts at reconciling just a month before the murders, and he started acting the same way. She realized that he wasn't going to change, and she was done. But I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that she'd been through this multiple times. And, the national average is that a woman that's involved as a victim in domestic violence will have at least 7 episodes of violence perpetrated on her before she actually leaves for good.
Mm.
And in this case, we know it took Nicole a little bit longer before she would leave. But
Yeah.
one of the things I discovered was the days leading up to the murder, she had a set of keys that went missing from her kitchen. And the only person who had been over, other than herself and her kids, was OJ. And I want to say, I believe they found those keys in OJ's possession.
Did they actually, though?
I believe they did.
Okay.
Yeah. Because it had a very unique kind of keychain. I can't remember what it was now, but I remember it being a unique keychain, and it was found in his possession. And I think when they questioned him about it, he, sloughed it off as, oh, I must have picked up the wrong set. I must have, done that by accident.
So,
But
so you think it's possible that he was waiting for her, and then they came home, and Ron just happened to be with her, and then he confronted them, or just assumed that something was going on that wasn't actually going on?
it might have been that he was there. We don't know for sure exactly that time frame of what time he would have arrived, but we do know what happened earlier in that night. And so, really, before I answer that, I think we need that buildup, which was they had all gone to a recital, a dance recital for their daughter Sydney, and all of the family was together. Nicole, her parents, her sisters, their family, and OJ. But OJ didn't stay seated with them. He got up angrily and moved during the recital to sit by himself. And this was going to be the first time in their entire length of their relationship, over 18, almost 20 years, that OJ wasn't going to be part of the Brown family celebration. The family was going to a restaurant to celebrate Sydney, the Mezzaluna restaurant, which is where Ron worked. And I believe, and so did Nicole's family, that OJ was angry that he wasn't invited.
Did the
So
family ask him to move when
I
he was
don't
at the
think they
recital?
asked him to move. I
Okay.
think he just got upset and angry, and it's not real clear why. We know later on, according to Cato Kalin, his house guest, OJ was ranting and raving about what Nicole decided to wear to the recital and how she was trying to look too young for her age and that kind of thing.
Mm.
So he might have just gotten up and, you know, gotten mad and moved. But going back to your idea, if OJ had that set of keys, he could have went over there and waited for her to get home from the restaurant. He could have waited for her to put the kids to bed so he didn't start a fight in front of the kids. And we know that she had lit candles in her bathroom upstairs, was running a bath water, and had gone down and actually gotten a bowl of ice cream, when we believe that Ron had come over, because she set the bowl of ice cream sort of like on the rail of the stairs to go upstairs.
Yep.
And it was melted when police finally found everything the next day, obviously, or early that morning. But it could be possible that OJ thought she was doing all of that to set it up for her and Ron, but that wasn't the case.
I guess we don't actually know if that wasn't the case, but even if that was the case, it doesn't justify what came next.
Well, we don't know for sure. No one will ever know for sure except Ron and Nicole, and they can't tell us. OJ made sure of that. But her family, his family, their friends said they didn't have anything going on between the two of them. It's simply that Nicole's mom had left her glasses at the restaurant. Nicole called to see if they were there. They were. And she was trying to make arrangements to pick them up. And Ron said he would drop them off to her when he got off work. So there was a reason for him to be there. And they actually found the glasses in an envelope near Nicole's body.
So maybe OJ never was inside and the keys are essentially irrelevant. But it's interesting though, right? That no neighbors heard anything. That there's two adults that are like mobile. He was able to murder them both, stab both of them numerous times. One couldn't get away. So, I mean, so he had to incapacitate one. How do you imagine that even happened? I mean, or is it, and I don't want to get you too worked up by this, did OJ have nothing to do with it? And there were multiple other people? Because, I mean, it feels like something where there had to be more than one person almost.
No, it doesn't. OJ did it. Let's be honest. There were neighbors who did hear a man. They heard two men's voices elevated, and then they heard one man say, "Hey, hey, hey." So my theory from reviewing all of this and digesting every documentary, every book, everything known to man on this case, my theory is it could have been the keys and he could have been there, but it also could have been he came over, the door to the house is open. He sees Nicole talking to Ron. She's still got the little black dress on that she had on at the recital that he thought was too young for her, too short for her, all of those things.
Yeah.
And he just lost it. He was angry. So, he wasn't allowed to go to the restaurant, but now she's flirting and going to do something with this man. So what I think probably happened is he incapacitated Nicole. Maybe he knocked her out. He shoved her to the ground. She hit her head because it was a cement, sort of like a cobblestone sidewalk and cement steps.
Mm-hmm.
So he might have knocked her out and she fell to the ground. And then that's when you hear Ron say, "Hey, hey, hey." And OJ, fought with him. We know that, I believe, Ron had at least 15 stab wounds to his scalp, his face, his neck, his chest, his abdomen, and his thigh. And he had some defensive wounds on his hands. So Ron was trying to fight back. And Ron's body was located just off the sidewalk in sort of like the little courtyard grassy area, if you will. While Nicole's, again, was at the base of the stairs and sort of in a fetal position. And she had been stabbed at least 7 times. In particular, she had a lot of defensive wounds on her hands, on her ring fingers particularly, they said. But she had stab wounds to her neck and her scalp, and one incredibly massive wound to her neck that was likely, according to the forensic pathologist who did the autopsy, done from someone pulling her head backwards, maybe by her hair, and cutting her neck from side to side, which nearly decapitated her. So if you think about it, he's mad. He sees them together. He knocks her out. He's dealing with Ron. Ron's trying to do what he can to, stop him. He stabs and kills Ron. Ron falls down, and now he is livid. He is absolutely livid, and he stabs Nicole multiple times and cuts her throat.
It's hard to believe that a human would react that aggressively to his ex dating someone else, even though I know that you would say that there's no proof that that was the case. Obviously, that's what he thought. It's just, oh, it's so extreme. And on top of all of that, were the kids there, like at the house?
Yeah, Sydney and Justin, who I believe were like 6 and 9, were asleep upstairs in their bedrooms.
Yeah. So I mean, and that it didn't wake them up. It's just, and it's also hard for me to believe. I know that the neighbors were reported hearing like hey 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 or whatever it was, but not hearing any like screaming or like any of that. It just seems so violent. I mean, it's hard to believe that no one heard anything except for the hey hey hey.
Well, I think that's why my theory really holds water that Nicole was probably knocked out because otherwise you're right. You have two people. You can't incapacitate both of them at the same time. And so it would have been likely Nicole would have been screaming or yelling or something. That's why I think he had knocked her out. And maybe she never came to. Maybe he stabbed her like that. We don't know that for sure, but that certainly could be plausible.
Yeah.
All the experts in this case, though, said this wasn't a random killing. It wasn't a quick type of killing. It wasn't a robbery. I mean, the door to her condo was open and there was, her purse and other valuables. Nothing was taken, so that wasn't it. But they said it was very personal. It showed a lot of anger and rage. Um, they said it showed a very strong person. The murderer was a very strong person to be able to do this, not only to fight Nicole. I mean, she was small in stature, but Ron was a fairly big guy. He was athletic. So it had to be someone who was very strong. Now, let's see, John, who fits that bill?
A lot of people, but in this
In
specific
this case,
case,
who fits that bill?
OJ fits that bill very well.
He does. He
He,
does. And, you throw in the anger and the rage. And, I don't think it was just a jealousy thing where, he sees him there. I think it stems from earlier in the night. I think, he was left out of the family and now he's mad about that. He's mad that she looked good in a short dress and didn't think she should. He's mad maybe for whatever other reasons he's mad about. And then he goes over there and it was like the icing on the cake. She's with another guy. How dare she?
so there's genuinely no other theory that you think holds any water.
Zero other theories hold
Zero.
water.
None.
None.
The drug dealer theory, the another lover, whatever theory. What was the defense saying? What did the defense say again?
The defense said it could have been a drug deal gone bad, but there's no evidence of that. They didn't find any drugs or anything else in the house. And Nicole had money, so that's not like it's something where it would have been she, wouldn't have paid her drug dealer. But I really think a lot of the things about her and drugs and being promiscuous and going out were floated out there by OJ and his team to basically smear her and her reputation. So she didn't have sympathy from people. She wasn't seen as a victim. He wanted to put it out there and make her less of a victim than she was, which is a narcissist thing to do.
But how do they convince a jury that this was not OJ? I mean, like you said, everything seems to point to him, and I know that we referenced this in the first episode as well. But it seems so difficult to do. Like, what was so convincing?
Well, I think there's a lot of things. I think his team was very effective at capitalizing on the missteps of the investigation. And there were a few. I think his team was very good at capitalizing on what we call red herrings to throw things out there to distract jurors and to get them to look at something other than all of this evidence. And, in looking at this, from my point of view as a prosecutor, there's probably a couple missteps that the prosecution did or didn't rebut clear enough. But more often than not, juries will say, we think somebody probably did it. We think they might have been involved, but we just couldn't believe it beyond a reasonable doubt. And maybe there were some jurors who thought wholeheartedly he didn't do this, but maybe there were some who had a few doubts. And when you hear that instruction that says you must be convinced beyond a reasonable doubt of the person's guilt to find them guilty. If you have reasonable doubt, then you must find them not guilty. Now, as a prosecutor for 25 years or so, try to define that phrase beyond a reasonable doubt. I mean, what do you think that means, John?
Beyond a reasonable doubt, in my mind, if I'm sitting there and I'm a juror and I'm told, I guess I would say that it just, I guess I don't, that's hard. It's hard. It's hard.
And I say that when I pick a jury, I'll ask people that, and they, struggle just like you did. Everybody does.
Yeah.
And I'll say, it's not beyond a shadow of a doubt. It's not beyond any doubt, but
just
it's
a reasonable doubt. But what does that mean? I mean, when you're talking about someone's entire life in your hands, potentially, I don't know, within the realm of possibility, certainly within the realm of possibility.
The way that the law defines it is it's a doubt based on reason and common sense. But it doesn't really help define it.
Not at all. Not at all.
So what I try to explain to jurors is, the only way you can know with 100% certainty that a crime happened
is if you're there.
If you're there.
Yeah.
And if you're there, you can't be a juror because you would be a witness.
Yes.
So it's not that you can't have any doubt. It's not that you can't have a shadow of a doubt, but it's a doubt based on reason. It's a doubt based on the evidence. It's a doubt based on, is there enough here, going back to that puzzle analogy we've talked about before, is there enough so you can see the picture in the puzzle as the pieces are coming together? If you're missing one little piece of the sky and the sky is all blue and there's nothing else there, that's not reasonable doubt, right? But it has to be more than that. And I think a lot of times jurors struggle with that phrase and with that thought. It's really hard.
So why is that the phrase that's used if people struggle with it so much? That's just the best we have?
That's the best we have. That's the law. And, they didn't ask my opinion on how to rewrite it.
Yeah. Well, they should.
Yeah, I have lots of ideas.
I have great ideas. It's hard for me to believe that nobody on the jury felt that OJ was genuinely guilty. It's very hard for me to believe.
It's very hard for me to believe too, but I think, again, in cases where maybe I don't agree with the jury verdict, and I've had several of my own where I didn't agree, you go back and you try to talk to them once you get a not guilty. And I do that in my cases to try to see, like, what did they latch on to? What, was the issue? And maybe they latch on to something that is very minor and minuscule. Maybe they start to believe some of the rhetoric from the defense.
Yeah. That's very interesting. Yeah. Something minor and minuscule to you as someone who's experienced, and you're like, oh, that doesn't mean anything. But for them, who knows what they turn it into in their minds? I mean, so like in your experience, and obviously you don't have to give like specifics, but what is it usually? Is it usually that they latch onto something like that, or is it that they just believe like the lies of the defense? Like what is it?
I think it's a little bit of all of that, and it can be a little bit of all of that for different jurors. So, when they go back there and they finally get to talk about this case, each individual juror has their own opinion. They have things maybe they saw differently than the juror sitting next to them. They maybe believe some of the rhetoric put out by the defense, or they believe the prosecution's theory of the case. And I think what happens in a situation like this is you have multiple jurors who have multiple questions. And then, someone throws that out as, well, there are 12 of us here and 8 of us have questions and wonder if this really happened. Is that enough for reasonable doubt? And then you start little by little to chip away at those who think someone is guilty.
And then it's easy to also just assume that any doubt is reasonable doubt. So like, am I a reasonable, rational person? I'm having doubts. Because I'm having doubts, this person must not be guilty, or I can't say that this person is guilty because I feel some type of doubt.
Yeah, I think that's hard. I think, jurors are not supposed to consider penalty at all when they are deciding and deliberating.
And that's impossible.
It's impossible because they're going to think about it. And you and I both know if someone is convicted of a brutal double murder, chances are they're going to spend the rest of their life in prison. That's not something you have to explain to the everyday juror that that's going to be what happens.
Yeah.
And so I think that weighs very heavy on the minds of jurors. But in this case, I think one of the hardest things for the prosecution to overcome was OJ was everybody's favorite football player. He was the favorite, comedic actor. He
charismatic.
So nice. He was charismatic. He was handsome. See, I threw it in there for you.
I'm so proud of you.
But I think that was a hard thing to overcome because, when we have a celebrity that maybe we all put on a pedestal and we look at them and think, gosh, their life is great. They've got money, they've got fame, they've got fortune. They live in Brentwood, in this big posh house. They have money and cars and all these things. People look up to that and they say, hey, this was a kid who, I don't think OJ came from a wealthy family. I think his family was pretty poor. And he really made something of himself. And so I think overcoming that persona of who OJ Simpson was, I think was also an obstacle and a barrier for the jury.
I think that's a good place for us to end for this episode. Next episode, we want to talk about the police investigation and what was dubbed the trial of the century. Marion, is there anything else you have for this episode before we move to the next one?
On this one, I just think we have to focus at the brutality of the crimes and what he did. And as I mentioned, those wounds that they both had and all of those things, there's a lot that we'll focus on in the next episode about the crime scene itself, what was discovered. And gosh, to me, when you put all of that together, I just don't understand the jury in this case. But I will do my best to put it together for the next episode and try to figure out what they were thinking.
Well, hopefully we can figure something out that no one's been able to figure out before related to this case or bring some sort of clarification. I don't know that we will. I mean, I'm not even like, it does boggle the mind how it happened this way, like how he was able to get off, because there doesn't seem to be any other plausible explanation. So if you have questions, we would love to hear from you. Please reach out to us on our Instagram page or our TikTok at BTV_pod.
If you have any thoughts on future cases for us to discuss, or if you have comments on cases we've already discussed because you just started listening to us, let us know that as well. We'd love to hear from you.
We're also waiting for somebody to take Myrene up on the offer to go up against her with the whole OJ's innocent defense. So we would love to experience that. So please reach out if you're that individual. You can find us wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.